Audrey is here from Grace Horizon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
And tell us a little bit more. We just saw some statistics on the screen about sex trafficking, particularly here in Indiana. But tell us about Grace Horizon, why you exist, and what you're doing in our community.
Yeah. Well, as I was rewatching some of those statistics, it can be a little bit overwhelming as you realize the staggering nature of trafficking and what that looks like here in central Indiana. And our organization exists because we want to bring hope to that situation. And so we see every day folks who are kind of climbing their way out of these really horrible, traumatic experiences with violence and exploitation, and are doing that step by step. And it's such an honor to be able to watch that unfold.
Yeah. So what's the why behind Grace Horizon? How did you come to exist?
Yeah. So we started off as an outreach program actually from a local church. And then as folks started to interact with this population of people, they said, oh, wow, there's a lot more to this than what we thought. And so then our organization was started. We've been doing this work for about 12 years now. And we just had a name change last year to Grace Horizon. And so just feel like that's a more hopeful, maybe name for the work that we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So how do you find the victim? I mean, how do the victims come to you? Like, how does the process work? Let's go there.
So originally, our organization was working with women who were in strip clubs. Okay. And so that's how we started. And then we had just some really strong relationships that were built there, and then saw that, oh, wow, human trafficking in central Indiana actually happens more in familiar ways. And so it's usually somebody that the victim knows, or a family member even, that is the one who's recruiting them into those situations. And so we started to restructure our program so that way we could actually serve the folks that are being affected most by this. But that means that we had this really strong base of folks already in place. And so a lot of times we are receiving referrals from the women directly. Okay. And now we've expanded our services to men as well. Okay. And so we have our first couple of those folks that have come on board in the last 6 months. And so we've been grateful to see all of that working together.
So what does the process look like to get somebody out of that cycle?
Yeah, so it's we leave that part of it to police force and to the professionals that do that, and so we're not the ones who are going and banging down the doors or anything like that. But when somebody has, I think it usually starts through relationship. Yeah. We say that we approach anti-trafficking through the 3 R's, so through relationship, recovery, and resource support. And so when we have that relationship with somebody, it could be even somebody who shops next to you in the grocery store. It could be your kid goes to school with their kid. And so through that, we see, that people realize their divine worth and that there's something more to live for. And then through that, then they start those conversations and say, maybe I could get out of this. And that hope starts to come and starts to kind of infuse them.
Right, because I'm assuming in most of these situations, there's some form of abuse, right? Like you have to want the help to get out. It's not just bang down the door, we come and get you, right?
Exactly.
A little more delicate.
And so much of it is, there's a grooming process that has happened. And for some of these folks, especially who have family members who are trafficking them, it's been a whole lifelong process.
Sure.
And so the mental abuse and the emotional abuse that has happened there is significant to overcome. So there's a lot of barriers, but there's also a lot of hope because we've seen just the way that people change, as they've been with us through this 5 to 7 year process. We're taking them from crisis to thriving in that time. And it's just been really cool to see.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that process of crisis to surviving. What does life look like for a survivor going through your program?
Yeah. So a lot of times they come to us, they meet with our social worker and we have an amazing team now of folks that are on staff. And so they meet with our social worker. They do kind of an assessment process to say, okay, what's happening right now for you? And kind of what does life look like for you? And then as we help them to stabilize, they kind of usually move into that under-resourced category. And that's when then the social worker will work with one of the coaches that we have on staff to help them do resource support or employment coaching or finance coaching or peer recovery coaching, whatever it is that they need to be able to then get those that kind of safety net in place for them, whether that's relationships that they need to rebuild or whether it's actual physical resources that they need to get. For a lot of our folks, housing is a huge piece of that, right? And so what you all do here at MyBOR is it makes such an impact for us and our organization for these folks. So then there's that piece, then they move on to kind of stability and then to thriving. But usually those pieces are, it's a long process as they go through that. So
nothing is easier. But what's the likelihood though of a victim after they've gone through a program returning to a life of exploitation?
Yeah. So in our field with anti-trafficking, it's typically 3 to 5 times that a person returns to the life is what we call it. And it's real similar to like situations of domestic violence. Usually it's 7 to 9 times that they're returning to that abusive relationship before it finally kind of sticks. But we take away from that every time that they go back, they have another skill in place, or they have another conversation in their mind that says, you know what, like there is a different way, or I can actually choose something different. Because so much of trauma when they are going through that is, I don't have a choice, right? People don't believe that they have a choice. Hopeless. You feel hopeless, you feel trapped, and you think this is just how it is and how it will always be. And so the fact that they go away, maybe they return to that scenario or situation, but they return with other skills that then make it a little bit easier next time to leave and make it a little bit easier the next time to leave. And then eventually it sticks.
Are there steps that we, the general public, can take to help end the trend of sex trafficking or exploitation? Like what can those of us that are watching probably have never heard that or didn't believe that this was actually going on in Indiana?
Right. I know.
What can we do to help stop that?
Yeah. Well, one way is you can donate to the Realtor Foundation and be able to raise funds, because as a grantee, again, those funds make a huge difference in helping people stabilize and to move forward with their lives. The other way is that you can go to our website. So it's gracehorizon.org, and you can look at the resources that we have on there. You can fill out if you want to volunteer with our organization. We've got some places to volunteer as well as donate on there as well. And then the other one is that I would say is just look for the vulnerable populations in your community and help to shore those things up, because traffickers, that's what they're looking for. They're looking to exploit the most vulnerable in society, because usually they're the ones without the resources and they don't have the ability to really fight back. And so, those are some of the ways that we can.
One of the statistics was, insecure housing. Is one of the gateways that we saw. Why we're here. Let's solve that. So to somebody out there who's watching that maybe still doesn't believe us that really is going on, maybe there's somebody who's in doubt or whatever. What would you say to them? Somebody that's like, oh, that doesn't really happen in Indiana.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it makes sense why they believe that, because the story that's often perpetuated in our society is a white young woman who gets taken off of the streets and, and captured and put into this situation. And so trafficking has, I think there's actually been 24 different types of sex trafficking alone that have been identified by the federal government. And so there's just so much more to it. And so a lot of times, like when I go speak at places, we had this happen at a church, and afterwards a woman came up to me and said, I didn't know that I was trafficked, but that happened to me. Wow. And so it's helping to tell a wider story, that it happens to the most vulnerable in our populations, that it's children who are at risk, that it's, folks who are housing insecure, and all of those sorts of things that help to build a better picture of what trafficking is so we can actually address the problem.
Yeah. Is there anything I haven't asked that is super important to touch on to drive the point home, or maybe to educate our viewers?
Well, I would say, so our tagline at Grace Horizon is practicing courage and rediscovering wholeness. And so often we come to this issue with an attitude or a mindset that somehow, these poor people, I would just say, if we can continue to look at the most vulnerable populations around us with hope, and to realize that there's wholeness inside of them, then that helps us to connect at a deeper level and helps people to trust that you have their best interest at heart, and to actually then move forward. And so, even if you are watching this and maybe you've got a young person in your life that you are concerned about or something like that, just remember that there's wholeness inside of them, and practice courage in entering into those conversations.
So aside from money, what else do you need? What other help do you need?
Yeah, I mean, we can always, like you said, use money, but also volunteers. And so that's a huge way that helps to support our organization. We have I don't remember if it's over 2,000 man hours each year that are donated to our organization through volunteerism. And that helps with making connections with the children, but of the participants that we're working with, but also, just doing daily tasks for our organization.
Sure.
Sure. That's huge.
Well, I know you mentioned it before, and we'll flash it again on the screen here in a minute, but tell everybody where they can go to learn more about what you're doing and how they can get involved.
Yeah. So it's gracehorizon.org is our website. If you go there and you click on the Get Involved page, then that'll give you some more tips on how to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.